Good day everyone, and welcome to Adventures with Parker. Today, we are continuing with the 2023 Pennsylvania Road Trip series, and just to recap what we've done so far, because Lord knows I've been working on this series for a while, we started out by checking out the Disney 100 exhibit with my friend Tom. Took some time to check out the sights and bites of Philadelphia, enjoyed some thrilling rides at some of the state's best theme parks, including Dorney Park, Knoebels, and Hershey Park, and now, it only makes sense that the next place for me to visit is, a coral reef? Did I read that right? A coral reef in the middle of Pennsylvania. Okay, well, this coral reef is fossilized, but 420 million years ago, the site was submerged in a shallow inland sea with a thriving ecological community. But millions of years of plate tectonics shifted, rotated, and deposited the remnants of this ancient marine community into what is now the Appalachian region of Pennsylvania. Those eager to dive into this long-lost Paleozoic world can do so at a family-owned show cave in the small town of Man's Choice, Pennsylvania, at an attraction called Coral Caverns. I had never explored a cave before, but it's something that had been on my bucket list for a long time. There's no shortage of interesting show caves in Pennsylvania, but as someone who loves learning about geology and paleoecology, Coral Caverns was a no-brainer for me. Now, this vlog is going to be a little different, as I wasn't allowed to film inside the cave. However, I was able to take plenty of pictures, so for today's video, I'm very excited to share those photographs, share what I've learned about the cave, and talk about my experiences, and hopefully provide some insight to anyone who's planning on visiting. So, without any further ado, let's blast to the past, and let the Coral Cavern adventures begin. So, our story truly began 420 million years ago, but I entered the picture on July 10th, 2023. It was a hot, sunny day, and I left my hotel in Hershey, Pennsylvania shortly before noon and made my way to Man's Choice, a very small community of 316 people in Bedford County, Pennsylvania, a 2-hour drive from where I was staying. Now, I'm no stranger to visiting places that people might consider to be a hidden gem, but Coral Caverns was way off the beaten path. Okay, so we made it to the cave tour office, and it's not even open. You gotta text a number there. So I'm waiting for a response. I'm getting here a little later than I thought I would. It's 12:30 now. The last tour is at 1, so I think I made it just in time, but it's so weird. Getting here is kind of interesting too, because I mean, obviously I'm off the interstate a bit, but there were no signs for the longest time, like no billboards advertising it. And then the GPS took me through like an industrial park for a bit of a way until I got back onto a back road. And even like coming up here on the main street, there was nothing for the longest time. Even as I was pulling up on the long dirt driveway to the main visitor center, I questioned whether I was even in the right place. And part of me feared that I had made a mistake and would be accused of trespassing on someone's private property. And although I had checked and double checked the hours before making the journey, I found that the door to the visitor center, which did in fact match the photos I had seen online, was locked. Did Google give me the wrong information? Had my desperate, nerdy pilgrimage been in vain? Okay, so I just got a reply. They are still doing tours today, thankfully, and they're gonna be here in 6 minutes. So I guess I'm just free to chill out by myself for a while. This is the weirdest thing I've ever done. A few minutes later, a truck pulls up, and I'm greeted by an older gentleman by the name of Bill. He was about to open the visitor center and start the tour when he dropped a crucial detail that could have ended my experience at Coral Caverns before it even began. The tour would cost $19, cash only. He said it was a common practice around those parts to only accept cash, being old-fashioned America and all. Well, as a Canadian traveler, I had grown accustomed to using my credit card everywhere I went, especially since most of the major theme parks had now gone cashless. Dejected, but understanding that there was nothing I could do, I returned to my car and pulled up Google Maps. Where do I go from here? Do I try to find something else to visit? Do I call it quits and just start driving home? Just then, Bill returned to my car and, even though I couldn't pay to go inside the cave, he offered to open the visitor center so I could have a look around. Well, at that point, I was more than grateful to accept his offer. Inside was a museum filled with fascinating fossils, rock samples, and cave-related artifacts. Some of the things on display came straight from the cave, while others were sourced from other sites around the world. All of it came together to tell the intricate story of how Earth's land masses have changed and shifted over millions of years, and how us humans have discovered that history. I was already more than satisfied with Bill's generosity in opening up the visitor center for me, but after I spent a couple minutes looking around, Bill piped up and said something that changed everything. "You know," he said, "in the past, I've run the tour for people who promise to send me a check in the mail after they get home. Like I said, this is old-fashioned America. We still believe in integrity here, and no one has failed to send me a check yet." And just like that, I was seated at a picnic table face to face with Bill, peering over some maps and fossil samples as he explained the mechanics behind how exactly a coral reef managed to find its way into the Appalachians. After his introduction, we made our way to the back door of the visitor center and down a short path, where I laid my eyes on the entrance to Coral Caverns. Our tour actually began just outside of the cave, at this rock. This would be our first of many glimpses of the Devonian Period reef, and all those little bumps are actually impressions made by invertebrates that lived in the seas during that time. You could clearly make out the shapes of trilobites and brachiopods that once called the reef home. But that was nothing compared to the fascinating world that lay within the cave. As with most show caves, Coral Caverns is illuminated by some beautiful colored LEDs, which allow the interior formations like stalactites and stalagmites to come alive with a mesmerizing glow. These formations on the ceiling are particularly interesting as they were formed by microorganisms and stromatoporidia, who deposited sediment such as calcite on the sea floor. We can see more of the Devonian reef here, and one of the coolest features is this spot that glows when you put a flashlight against it, which is caused by the crystalline structure of the minerals. Bill had a wealth of knowledge to share about all of the features inside the cave, and it was so fascinating to hear him talk about it all. He even had cool names for some of the cave's more unique structures. We have the Southern Tunnel, the Forest of Columns, the Three Wise Men, Cinderella's Ballroom, the Castle, and the Cave Donkey, just to name a few. And that brings us to the end of the tour. The entire experience took about 45 minutes to complete. Now, there isn't much else in Man's Choice, but as you're driving out, there's this little ice cream parlor called Sundays. It's pretty cool, and they specifically hire veterans in need of work. And I got to try this delicious s'more sundae. But yeah, I'm so happy that my visit to Coral Caverns worked out in the end. It was a fascinating experience, and getting a one-on-one tour with Bill was incredible. Although videos were strictly forbidden, he was more than happy to take some photos for me to use in my vlog. I learned so much from him, and I really enjoyed the tour overall. Bill, I don't know if you're watching, but thank you so much for your generosity and for providing such a cool opportunity to learn something new. For anyone who's thinking about paying Coral Caverns a visit, I highly recommend it. If you're not used to these kind of off the beaten path, old school America kind of places, the experience can be a bit of a shock. But as long as you have a sense of adventure and keep an open mind, it is so worth it. especially if you're a total nerd like myself. Of course, this was my first foray into the world of show caves, and this is definitely the kind of thing I'd like to do again. I have a few other spots in mind for future adventures, but I would absolutely return to Coral Caverns again if the opportunity arises. But what about you? Have you ever done a show cave in Pennsylvania or elsewhere? What are some of your favorites? Comment below and let me know. We are almost finished with the PA road trip series, and my next stop is a small park in Erie called Waldameer. There, I got to check out some awesome coasters like Ravine Fire 2 and some classic Bill Tracy dark rides. If you don't want to miss that, or any of my other future adventures, you might want to consider becoming a subscriber if you aren't already. I'm also pretty active on social media, so you can find me on Instagram, Threads, and X at ADVParker, and on Facebook and TikTok at Adventures with Parker to continue the conversation. As always, big shout out to my patrons for all of your generosity and support, and if you want to learn how you can support the channel for as little as $1 a month, head on over to patreon.com/ADVParker to learn more. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, the adventures are calling. Bye! They were formed by microorganisms in Stromatoporidia.